Emmanuel Macron is preparing Europe for an era of never-ending war against Russia, as he says peace is only attainable with a pacified Russia. Emmanuel Macron claims that France must be prepared to face Russia and confront Russia because they can never be trusted to follow ceasefires and treaties.
Peace will return to our continent with a pacified Russia, nor can it be based on a weak ceasefire. And we've had experience of this in the past as well. We cannot forget. But Russia started its invasion of Ukraine in 2014, and we negotiated the Minsk Accords ceasefire. That was something that Russia didn't respect. And we weren't able to maintain balance because there weren't solid guarantees. So we can't take Russia at its word.
This is an argument of a madman, and one that neocons use in order to justify a never-ending conflict. Emmanuel Macron is blatantly lying about Russia breaking treaties and ceasefires. It was the UK, Germany, and France that advised Ukraine to break the Minsk Accords. In fact, Angela Merkel of Germany openly admits that the Minsk Accords was used to buy time so Ukraine can stockpile weapons and prepare for future conflict with Russia. Emmanuel Macron also floats the idea of expanding the nuclear arsenal in Europe, threatening nuclear war. Can you imagine the Western media reaction if Vladimir Putin was saying the same thing about nuclear war that Emmanuel Macron is currently floating right now? And all of this bluster, for what? Russia has made it clear they have no intentions of invading the rest of Europe. They simply want a neutral Ukraine. So people should be asking themselves why Emmanuel Macron and European leaders are floating the idea of nuclear war instead of simply having Ukraine as a buffer state. Syria descends into full-blown civil war after Jelani and his HTS thugs launches a campaign of political violence against the Alawites and their political enemies. After the fall of Assad, which was assisted by Turkish and Israeli forces, the country of Syria has descended into full-blown chaos.
Nobody knows who the other side is, but I do. You know who it is? Turkey. Okay? Turkey's the one behind it. He's a very smart guy. They've wanted it for thousands of years, and he got it.
This is what everyone predicted would happen after the fall of Assad. And bringing up this obvious point got you called an Assad apologist. Now we have videos of the Jelani al-Qaeda-ran government in Syria torturing and killing religious minorities and people they view as their political enemies. So instead of confronting the Zionist entity, which is actively stealing your lands and resources, Jelani and the Syrian government spends their time attacking their own people instead. But despite Israeli aggression and the fact that the United States steals 80% of Syria's oil output, the Jelani terrorist-sponsored government is focusing on cracking down on religious minorities instead of confronting the Zionist entity. In fact, Jelani is begging for normalized relationships with the United States and Israel, despite their crimes they committed against the Syrian people. This is because Jelani is a United States-Israeli plan that was installed and propped up in order to destabilize Syria on behalf of the Israeli regime. All the professional managerial class Arabs like CARE and Al Jazeera who cheered on the downfall of Assad should be ashamed of themselves. You guys proved to be youthful idiots for the Israeli regime and for Al-Qaeda. And Al Jazeera knows it as well, which is why they are purposely avoiding covering this story and how Syrians are being massacred because of the government overthrow of Assad that they supported.
What's poppin', my friends? My family, welcome back. You guys know on Friday you get two bangers, two hot spots. I'm always in the lab cooking. There's so much going on, and what's going on in Syria is a complete tragedy. And this is exactly what the true anti-imperialist left was warning about. The people like Mehdi Hassan, CARE, Al Jazeera, and many of the professional managerial class political analysts, they was cheering for the downfall of Assad. They was cheering the Syrian revolution, even though it was obvious that the Syrian revolution was the result of Turkish interference, Israeli interference, and United States interference. So the idea was that if you are a principled leftist, you're supposed to be against the overthrow of Assad because we are against intervention, Western intervention. Now, if you had the will of a populace that creates an organic uprising against the state, that's one thing. I will stay neutral, or I will side with the proletariat. But you do not cheer for a Western intervention that was obviously going to create a power vacuum that is occupied by the opposition of Assad, which was Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and terrorists in the ATS. And the videos coming out over the last 48 hours, it's truly barbaric. I can't show any of it on YouTube. Like, it's all over Twitter. I seen a video of a child being executed by the quote-unquote moderate rebels, the reformed woke Al-Qaeda that they want you to believe is real. Why do they want you to support regime change in Syria? Why did the West support regime change in Syria? Why did they put so much sanctions on the Syrian government that it was too weak to respond to a foreign uprising? They did it to weaken the resistance. And now you have Jelani, who is begging for Israel to love them. This is what I mentioned in my hotspot. You guys saw it. I was doing a lot. Obviously, I had to cover this. And I see our guests. So yeah, we got a lot of banger guests. We got Jody Burr joining us Monday. And we have amazing journalist from Mintpress News and Colonial Outcast podcast, Greg Stoker, who will be joining us. We had a great conversation on his channel. I'm going to introduce you here very soon as I finish this quick intro. This is why the Western establishment cheered this on. This is why the New York Times is doing propaganda on behalf of HTS and his terrorist thugs that are executing children, my friends, torturing civilians, and they're calling them Assadists, pro-Assad group fighting against the government. This is why new leaders in Damascus call for cordial Syria ties with a resistant Israel. So you have Israel that is invading Syria, stealing their land, stealing 30% of their water supply. Meanwhile, the HTS terrorists are spending their time killing their own people while begging for Israel and the United States to love them. That's why you get headlines like these. I have so many receipts. Where I put this one at? Here it is. And I'll bring my guests in on this headline. You see this utterly disgusting propaganda here? If I can show you guys the videos that's out on Twitter, hit the point even more, like the people being tortured or killed. But look, more than 140 killed and clashes. By the way, that's an undercount. I'm hearing estimates that there's death counts in the thousands. Over a thousand, I should say, not thousands. That's what I'm hearing from independent journalists, because they're going door to door. I'm gonna show you guys Rania Khalek's reported on this. They're going door to door, wiping out the Alawites. So this 140 is already bullshit, by the way. But let me read it. More than 140 killed in clashes. If only I could show you today. I am seeing children being executed. There are men that are being tortured, being humiliated, crawling like dogs, barking. Like, I'm seeing mass executions of civilians, and they describe it as clashes between Syrian forces and Assad loyalists. So Assad was an Alawite. Can you imagine if MAGA, after they was elected, imagine if Donald Trump, after he was elected, decided to murder and kill African Americans because African Americans was more likely to support Democrats. Can you imagine normalizing that? Oh, Donald Trump, the U.S. government forces clashes with Obama's loyalists. That's insane. But what I said, I want to introduce our guests. I'm very interested in getting their perspective on this. Once again, we have amazing geopolitical analysts. Also do work for mintpress News and has a new show on YouTube, The Colonial Outcast, that I was just on. Thank you for making time, man. We had a great conversation a few days ago.
It was great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you've been following what's been going on in Syria over the last 48 hours. I had to do a monologue.
Yeah,
we have to be very careful what we show, but I want to get your thoughts on this. No, I just want to get your thoughts on this because I would love to show you guys everything, but YouTube is just looking for a fucking reason. You know what I mean? So, Greg, what can you explain more in detail? I know you do great work on the Middle East, Syria, mintpress News. You guys do great work on that. What can you explain to our audience what the hell is going on?
The situation on the ground is really confused, and it's this has always been the problem with Syria. There's just so many different factions and so many different factions within factions. To paint HTS as a monolith is in itself inherently problematic. There's a lot of violence, unrest going on the ground. There's a lot of discontent in Syria, especially in the area surrounding Damascus, about basically parlaying with the Zionist government and Israel. Also, there's a lot of I was talking to an ex-IDF soldier the other day. I interviewed him on mintpress News, and we were talking about the clashes that were happening in Druze suburbs in the south. And, you know, a lot of that seems staged. Israel, of course, wants to use its periphery doctrine, which is basically to empower not just certain non-Arab nations, like create alliances with like Turkey and Ethiopia when it was first envisioned, this periphery doctrine, when it was first envisioned back in the 1950s. And David Ben Gurion talked about it. But it's not just about creating friendly non-Arab states around itself, but also non-Arab groups are outside of its borders in order to insulate itself from Arab states. Right. So the clashes we've seen between like HTS and the Druze or whoever was doing it, Israel wants to bring in and create like a new Druze client state. Also, you know, the Maronite Christians as well in southern Lebanon. But at the end of the day, the situation is very confused right now. The HTS government, of course, is not to be trusted, Jolani being an ex-Al-Qaeda guy. And the only way to go legit after killing Americans in Iraq, when you're part of that institution, is to become a CIA asset. There's a lot of like the Al-Qaeda operative that was took responsibility for the bombing of the USS Cole in 2000 in Yemen in the port of Aden. Was an ex-Al-Qaeda guy. Now, BBC World did a documentary about mercenaries in Yemen, U.S. mercenaries in Yemen, about 10 years ago, and pretty much very compellingly proved that guy is now a CIA asset fighting the Houthis on behalf of the United States. So there's just a lot of precedent. I think the United States and Israel is very happy with the situation in Syria right now, the balkanization of Syria. And then, of course, Israel is very happy. They took control of these water resources, and a lot of that water source in Syria actually funnels into Jordan. So now they have political water leverage on Jordanian politics as well. Yeah. So anyways, I think
Israel, great breakdown. And you would think that if in the corporate media, the way they lie to Americans, Westerners in general, is wild, because they painted Jelani as this moderate, reformed, and you can tell he was clearly coached.
He wasn't just coached; they made him look exactly like Zelensky.
Oh, Jesus Christ! I can see that. Yeah.
No, like his get up, his beard. He trimmed his beard. He got his haircut done. Like literally, they made him look like Zelensky because we were already accepting Zelensky, and that's what a resistance leader looks like. So they literally coached his appearance as well.
Yeah,
and then of
there's
course
so many headlines.
you had the liberal media apparatus and the New York Times being like, what do they call him? A moderate jihadi.
Yeah, I saw that. I wish I could find the headline. I was looking for it. But
Yeah.
there's so many of these hilarious headlines. And I saw one interview where they was like, hey, man, where he was like, hey, man, I know I was into some terrorist shit before, but I was young and dumb, man. I just want to get into politics. Hey, I'm more reformed now. I'm more modern. And they just go around with it. I got to turn my ad blocker on. I usually block all these ads on these websites. But let me pull this headline. This is another example. I just found this real quick of how they try to clean up this guy's image. Who is Syria Jelani, the man behind Syria's fall, known for his moderate approach? Like what? We are already seeing, and God damn, I gotta find a screenshot I posted on Twitter, how they are already promoting, and you have people in Jelani's political sphere that's advocating for Sharia law and the crackdown on minority rights and women's rights. And the Western media refuse to cover any of this. They already been cracking down on their minorities, and now with this attack, they're just covering it up by pretending that they're just going after former Assadists. And you explained before, this is people who are upset at the current regime because they see Israel straight up invading. Let me pull this headline here. And the way the corporate media has been covering this has been hilarious. Look, Israel orders troops to remain in Syria buffer zone. Buffer zone is a very weird way to explain how you just seizing land, invading an area and seizing land. So this is also the result of Israeli aggression. Will you say that's also the case?
Yeah, well, Israel, of course, they like to repackage what is, in fact, defensive expansionism. They have to expand in order to defend themselves. They reluctantly take ground, but they have to because all the Arabs want to kill them for no reason. So, yes, they're a little buffer zone going on. And basically what we're seeing here is because they tried to do the same thing in Lebanon, but they got repulsed by Hezbollah. So if you can't do it in Lebanon, do it in Syria, take what you can. So Israel basically just tries to create chaos, and they don't really have a strategic agenda, at least one that they put out publicly. It gives Iraq War, George Bush, mission accomplished vibes, where they just create chaos, see what they can exploit, and hold ground where they can. And now, again, they're very happy with the current situation. In Syria, there's no strong central government that wants to resist them. When HTS took control, they actually destroyed their entire modern military infrastructure. So now even if HTS wanted to fight them, well, they don't have any air bases, they don't have any munitions depots. They basically just have small arms and RPGs and Toyotas to go up against Israel. So even if HTS wanted to resist the IDF, they couldn't. There's literally nothing they could do anyways. So yes, of course,
To remind you,
we can criticize them for being the problematic organization and government that they are. However, even if they weren't, there's literally nothing they can do.
Yeah, Jelani's groveling to the Zionist regime is very disgusting, like this headline I said before. That's a good point, though. The groveling, and it's clear that he wants these ties. He's calling for normalizing and have friendly ties to Israel despite all their crimes. But that's a very good point. And I'm going to show a few more of these, and then we can move on. I saw a lot of I got to be very careful what I show because it's very brutal. Very hard to watch videos that are being shared. I'm going to read this tweet, a good reporting from Hadi. Entire Alawite families killed by Jelani's jihadist orcs in Syria. Dr. Bassam Saab, I believe that is, and his family, Dr. Ibrahim Naza, his pharmacist sisters and his mother. The death toll is still on the rise. And I still got to look at the updated numbers, but I just know for a fact that that 140 number used by the New York Times is an absolute joke. Here's Rania explaining, here's exchange for my friend and their mom in Syria. Their mom says that the HTS fighters are going door to door. The husband of my friend's cousin went to open the door, and they shot him outside. He died in front of his wife and 2 daughters. So they going door to door, and this is just according to citizen journalism. Rania is great, and there's a lot of people report on the ground. So this is why I saw the headline in the New York Times, and it's utterly disgusting because they're just painting this as like, oh, these are people who just want to implement the Assad regime, and this is why the government is going after them. But Greg, I think you want to chime in, so I'll pass to you for any thoughts you have.
Yeah, well, obviously, there is no indication that the HTS government can keep control of all the HTS forces. We've talked about them as like one entity, but there are factions within the groups, within the fighters as well. And there's no indication that the actual government that's just been installed can keep control of all these different groups within the HTS. Saw that. So like a lot of
this is one of the more PG videos that we can show.
Yeah,
this is about as PG as it gets, and it's still horrific. But go ahead.
Yeah, so a lot of this looks like rogue action too. Like where different like groups of extremists within the HTS umbrella are just doing whatever the hell they want now. Now that they've been established and they're kind of out for blood, and so I don't think. I'm not sure. I haven't seen anything that connects it to actual policy coming from Jelani, but from a military perspective, based on what I'm seeing, it's just guys running rogue. So I'm not sure if this is a government policy or just homegrown extremists within their own ranks doing whatever the hell they want.
Yeah, it seems like Jelani is not doing anything to criminalize this behavior, not anything to.
Well, he's definitely not. He's definitely not saying anything about it publicly. Yeah, he's definitely not denouncing it. So there's that.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely appreciate that point. And I've seen this here before. I don't want, and obviously these are just random people, but it's just disgusting. See the Jelani supporters celebrating the massacres, saying these clips are heartwarming. Once again, I gotta be very careful what I show actually here because there's so many dead bodies that we're seeing. Al Jazeera, I saw a headline before where they did the same thing. Essentially, the New York Times did, where they just repeat that, oh, this is Assad forces that they're going after. And here, DD Geopolitics, our friends. They put video to show proof that how Al Jazeera, one of the outlets who also cheered the downfall of Assad, is refusing to cover and highlight these tragedies, these atrocities being committed by the Syrian forces. So I think that's pretty damning as well. So I can wrap this segment here. Anything else you want to say, Greg? It's very tragic what's going on in Syria. Like I said, I know it's very confusing. There's a lot coming out from the ground, but that this is a tragic situation going on in Syria. Any thoughts, Greg?
Well, I'm pretty sure I'm banned for life from Al Jazeera because when I was on there last time, I talked about Operation True Promise 2.0, where Iranian missiles actually put Iranian rockets put rounds on target onto Israeli military bases. And, they're a Qatari media outlet. They've got a lot of state-sponsored beef against Iran and anything associated with Iran. So there's definitely not going to be objective reporting about Syria, especially when it comes to Assad. And of course, I've been very outspoken for years about this. I'm no fan of Assad, but however, the one-sided nature of how the mainstream media, to include Al Jazeera, is reporting on this is basically completely unethical, just from a journalistic perspective.
Yeah, absolutely, and I 100% agree. And to me, it's weird how people will call you Assadist by simply opposing U.S. intervention to Syria. Like I cheer for the proletariat across the world to overthrow the capitalist oligarchs, but I would never support U.S. intervention to help that, especially if that meant to benefit the Zionist regime. And hopefully that makes sense. I want to play this video here because we're going to shift topics. We have a few things we're going to cover. I want to keep this around an hour. Our foreign policy power hour, which I've been calling these. Once again, great to have Greg from mintpress on here. So I want to share this. I saw this earlier today. I want to squeeze it here because we got some good news regarding the American opinion of Israel. And we are seeing the West turn against Israel in this massive way. And this is why we're seeing this attack by Zionists saying that there is a rise of anti-Semitism. They say anti-Semitism is out of control in the United States, it's out of control in Canada. And they always say, oh, these people who stand for free Israel, they're just going after the Jews. They hate the Jews. That's why we criticize them, Greg, apparently.
Yeah.
Justin Trudeau, who explains how he's a proud Zionist. And I'll just play the video because this goes to my point on why our criticisms about Israel has nothing to do with the Jews. It's a Western collaboration to in support of in the worship of colonialism, just to keep it simple. But let's watch this clip and I would love to get your thoughts on this, Greg.
I'm not getting audio.
All right, good look. I don't, man, this thing been glitching recently. I just gotta refresh it.
Yo, I have the same thing when I play a page on StreamYard. It doesn't give the audio to the other parties on the stream. All
right, let me here's the tab. Let me play the video. I actually have a point that follows this, so let's play the video. Well, let me know if it's working. It works on my side, but then I had to watch.
Yeah. Well, if I don't get audio, if you could just tell me what he says.
Okay, I'll read it.
In Canada, should ever
got it.
Need to call themselves a Zionist. I am a Zionist.
No one
was that from today?
I don't know exactly when that from. I'm pretty sure it's recent. It was at least within the last 12 hours. I saw this video was flowing around where he said no one in Canada should ever be afraid to call themselves a Zionist. And this goes to the point that I'm making regarding why it's not about the Jews. There's Zionist collaborators. Zionism is enabled by evangelical Christians and Muslim Zionists in the Middle East who enable the state of Israel as well. But Greg, before I continue, any reaction to this clip?
I mean, really, the more and more I look at this and the more and more I hear Zionism, it honestly seems more of like a class issue than anything. Like when I talk to anti-Israel people on the right, they have a lot of like white supremacist conspiracy theories about it, like the Jews control everything. It's like, no, dude, it's a colonial project.
Yeah,
all right.
Sure.
You know, the upper class banking Jews that were in Germany in the 1930s, they got out and sold all the working class Jews under the bus as well. So this has always been a class-based issue. And, you know, they want to talk about, the Jews controlling everything in the banks. I'm like, I mean, I grew up in New England. I went to elite boarding school before I got expelled and ran off and joined the army. What about the WASPs? You know, you know, they want to create this idea of a massive cabal of Jews and Zionists in order to not talk about capitalism. But Israel has been an expression of that. So
yeah, that's absolutely a great point. It's always interesting to see these more libertarian style people who try to find anything they can to criticize Israel without using the word colonialism, apartheid. They come up with all these conspiracy. No, it's actually the Jews that are brainwashing the whites to. It's always, I talk to these people all the time because I had a lot of people on the right who follow me. I'm like, dude, don't stop saying the Jews, dude. They come up with all these conspiracies because making it about the Jews doesn't make sense, considering the support from the evangelical right. Which, go to your point, I want you to respond to this because this is good news. Like, we're not always about doomerism here. Because I want to take the win. You know what I mean? Because I can always be an asshole, like, oh my God, only 46%. No, man, I'm going to take the win because I've been covering this. I've been covering Israel for the last 4 years, ever since I started as a citizen journalist. You've been covering this for years. This is one of those stories like, man, this is going to take a very, very fucking long time to turn this around. Americans are so behind. The world standing with Palestine. So to see this number be the lowest in 25 years, I'm going to just take the win. I'm very proud to see that. What is your reaction, Greg? Are you seeing the same thing with people twisting their and changing their opinion about the Israel-Palestine conflict?
Absolutely. I don't think it was even on people's radar until after October 7th. And I think a lot of the atrocity propaganda that Hezbollah put out about October 7th actually made people pay attention to it and start researching and learning about it. And it's kind of like, that's what we call information blowback. So by actually spreading so much atrocity propaganda about October 7th and making it an international issue, they've had this blowback where people are starting to be like, okay, well, October 7th was bad, but also why did we just give $7 billion to Israel in the last 2 weeks? You know, that's a bread and butter issue for a lot of Americans as well. And so this is a Gallup poll. What was the demographic of this particular one? Is it the Americans?
This is a wide overall poll. I know they asked Democrats. I see the split between Republicans, Independent, and Democrats. I haven't read the entire poll, but here's a partisan split where even 76% of Democrats are supportive of an independent Palestinian state. And, and even I even see the 41% Republican number. I know a lot of people like to be downers, man, but that's a lot, dude. Like 41% of Republicans. That's the same. I remember when a Medicare for All poll came out, where they're like only 30% of Republicans support single payer. I'm like, dude, that's a lot. So 1 out of 3 Republicans support single payer. Based on this poll, 4 out of 10 Republicans support a Palestinian state. That doesn't that seem like a lot? You know what I mean? I feel like that's changed.
But also that is a loaded question that's actually too complicated for a lot of people. So a lot of people are going to be like, I'm not sure or no.
Yeah, good point.
But if you were to reframe the question to not do you support an independent Palestinian state, do you think we should stop sending weapons to Israel and stop sending money to Israel? You'd see those Republican numbers go way up. Also,
yeah, and that poll was there was a poll released a few weeks ago I covered it showing that majority of Americans are against funding Israel, especially it's spiked on the Republican side, which is why it's extremely strange. And this shows how much the Zionists captured the government, for lack of a better term. Because obviously we can go to a deep conversation about how the empire and the state of Israel is intertwined. But despite this new awakening, for the lack of a better term, from many of the MAGA people, because I still have a lot of smoke for Candace Owens. I got for her cheering the police state on and many other cultural war takes, but her turning on this issue was gigantic, man.
But of course, but of course, like, yes, I'm glad Candace Owens has used her platform to educate people about Palestine and Israel. But again, she's one of those right wingers who will do anything to not connect it to the greater system that not only enables a genocide in Palestine, but is also building cop cities outside of Atlanta, Georgia.
For sure. Absolutely. Great point. That's why I have a lot of smoke with her, because she cheered on the police state execution of George Floyd, for example. And then she would say, oh, don't you know that George Floyd was using drugs? That doesn't fucking matter. Like, let's say hypothetically you're right. That doesn't give the police the right to kill people. That came directly from Israel.
It's like, what do you want? Do you want Judge Dredd, where cops are like judge, jury, and executioner?
Yeah,
and like there's absolute punishment where either you don't perform a crime or you jaywalk and you get capital punishment. Like I don't know what she really wants. But again, she's one of those problematic commentators who has to blame it on the Jews and the Jewish cabal, because she can't talk about, the economic system and the class system that enables it.
She also makes it about religious struggle as well. So she will bring up how, don't you know that, hey, God, don't you know Israel is murdering Christians?
Why do you that's the only thing you care about.
Yeah, so it's not inherently bad because a violent apartheid colonial state executing people who resist them. It's, oh my God, so what about the Christians? Which, once again, that's a big deal. It shows the hypocrisy of the Christian Zionists, right? The people who cheer on Jewish people bombing Christians. That's another point. But you gotta see, that's the only empathy that Candace Owens has. There's not a strong principal point to stand against colonialism and apartheid. So that's a great point. And this is what Candace Owens and the people on the right who are speaking out against Israel, this is what they should be hammering, but they're not. This is not what Ian Carroll is talking about. It's not what the Trump supporters, people who criticize America, is talking about. How Trump is building a technocratic state that's going to use AI to criminalize dissent against Israel. Yeah, Donald Trump that threatened to lock up Americans who threatened to protest against Israel, and he's threatening all these universities with funding. So, Greg, I will look at your thoughts on this. I'm gonna show you guys some more receipts as Greg is talking. But this crackdown on the freedom of speech, and I see the technocrats, the capitalists who also lock hands with the Zionist class, because that's the only way you can exist in this environment, are more than happy to use their power to help enable the Israeli regime. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that general topic, because I see a very troubling trend.
when I see headlines like this, State Department to use AI to revoke visas of students who appear pro-Hamas, I just think this is the imperial boomerang in full effect.
Yes.
Where, colonial forms of violence and repression through imperial feedback redound back on the citizens of the imperial core, because like the same AI that's used to traffic this was most likely, I have to look into the story, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was first developed to enforce occupation and apartheid on Palestinians, and now it's coming back to the core to be used on its own citizens. So I'm actually going to, after this, I'm going to dig into like what AI program they're using and who developed it, because I'd be very surprised if it wasn't made in Israel.
That's a fantastic point. And Peter Thiel and Palantir profited directly from the genocide in Gaza because they were providing Israel AI, which they would use to develop target, which we know was bombing indiscriminately civilians. Mm-hmm. So that's why they love the Gaza genocide. That's also why they cheer for the Ukraine war. They mentioned that many times before, because it was a way for them to test their new shit. Test their new shit, see what we can bring back home. Let's modify it. So Gaza was a giant genocidal playground for the ruling class. And this is one of the main things that we are seeing come back home. I have no love for Colombia. In fact, I think this shit is hilarious in a lot of ways because Colombia folded. Colombia folded and still went after pro-Palestinian students. I was just say anti-genocide students, and they still paying for it. That's what they fucking get. But anyway, Greg.
I'm not surprised about the administration's crackdown in Colombia. I mean, I went to Colombia for 2 years before I dropped out, but yeah, I'm definitely not surprised at all. And they're catching a lot of heat for it, but also Colombia, to be fair, the student movements in Colombia were always at the spear tip of these social movements. So they were occupying buildings first during the Vietnam War, fossil fuels against South African apartheid, and they caught heat, international heat for it. The student body and the administration always cracked down on this. So this is nothing new for Columbia University. The students rise up at Columbia, and the administration cracks down. They did the same thing for Vietnam, for South African apartheid, for fossil fuels. It doesn't really look any different on campus, because I've actually been to Columbia campus a couple times since October 7th, 2023. And yeah, it's mostly business as usual. What's different is that the entire U.S. government is basically doing this, the crackdown that the administrations used to do independently. But now there's like this fusing of institutional will within the government, and there's both for Democrats and Republicans, right? Because it was the same thing with the actual campus administrations, which is definitely concerning. And I just wish that the Democrats would resist the Trumps and Elon Musk's gutting of the federal government and treat it like it was a student protest on a campus.
Well said. This is Trump in his unhinged tweet. Elise Stefanik, she went to the UN to cry about anti-Semitism. The world hates the Jews. Why are you guys going after us because we're bombing kids? Like she's like the biggest Zionist Karen. And the second that she got that Harvard president fired, I knew her career was made. I knew that the Zionist lobby will reward her for a lifetime after that. So she was now installed as the UN representative by the United States. And I'm sure she's going to be a thorn. She's still young. She's going to be a thorn on our side for decades to come. She is the most insane pro-genocide queen possible. She went up there in the UN and was like, hey, man, me getting Harvard presidents fired was just the beginning. And just to highlight how crazy...
Strap in!
Yeah, you saw that. Just to highlight how crazy Elise Stefanik is, Claudine Gay, as I explained to people who watch my initial coverage, is not pro-Palestine. In fact, she has said many times before, she's like, I think that the pro-Palestinian protests are disgusting. I think it's anti-Semitic, academic, but there's this thing called the First Amendment. I can't really do anything about it. So she didn't even endorse the protest. She simply said, hey, I can't really do anything about it. That got Elise Stefanik and a group of Zionist Karens to get her fired. And now they're trying to replicate this entire thing as a united executive government body. But Greg, I think you want to try, man. Feel free. I know you have.
I just want to point out one of the things that I was talking about yesterday on one of my episodes was the note. If you pull that back up again,
yeah, I got you.
Trump says, and this brings back more AI and more Peter Thiel Palantir related stuff. American students will be permanently expelled or, depending on the crime, arrested. No masks, because they want to be able to put you into an AI database and instantly recognize who you are. And I will also point out that if you've seen any ICE videos, and I live in Texas, I see ICE. They've got masks on because they don't want their identities to be known. So
wow,
ICE raids, masks, student protests, no masks. So that's just where the state's going right now. It's gonna be fun. You know, it's 2025. If you love 2025, you're gonna love 2026. All right, let me tell you.
That's a great point about the mask, man. It's all about creating a technocratic era. That's why it's so strange to see anyone who, like a libertarian, still support this. It's obvious what they're doing. That's such a great point about the mask. The fact that he said he's going to be arrested for this is like, and this is not new to us. I'm sure you knew, because I've been explaining for years. Whenever people say that there was a free speech right, I always brought up Ron DeSantis and how he criminalized BDS in Florida, and how there's always been this free speech exception on Israel. And after October 7th, the Mossad, Israel, essentially they called all their people they handle. They told them, like, no, there's no tolerance for dissent on opposing the plan of Greater Israel. We're going to start an anti-Semitic psyop, and we're going to completely end free speech. Which is why it's insane that Americans are going along with this. This has been a story I've been covering for a while. Go ahead, Greg. I think you want to try. Go ahead, feel free.
Oh, no. I mean, I could go on about this mask thing forever, because like that is kind of freedom of speech and freedom of expression, right? You should be able to wear whatever the fuck you want, whether it's in a protest or not a protest. But we are seeing the criminalization of masks, and it's specifically over the Palestine stuff, because like during BLM, the whole mask thing wasn't an issue. It wasn't not just getting into the public discourse by our political leaders, but it actually wasn't being legislated. So my partner, she's Jewish and from Long Island, so we often have to go up to Long Island, and which is like the Zionist heartland, right? Long Island. They've actually criminalized masks, and 3 people in Nassau County have got arrested for wearing kefias just around their face.
That's crazy.
And also they're criminalizing COVID masks. So like if you go to a protest and you just want to be like, no, I'm masking, I don't want to get sick. That's also, you could be arrested for that in certain districts in Long Island. So that's kind of, it starts in the Zionist heartland, and I think we're gonna see that creep throughout the rest of the country, and then what happens in the U.S. impacts what happens in Europe. So they'll probably implement similar policies with their far right nationalist governments that are taking nationalist parties that are taking over in the European heartland as well. So yeah, cool. That's just what I want to say about masks.
No, that's a very great point, and that's something that we really need to hammer home, is their crackdown on the freedom of expression regarding masks. And this shows why and how Zionists use retaliation, especially economic retaliation, as a way to maintain their control. That's why it's very hard to host Palestinian roundtables. I have one coming up. I think it's on the 15th. We had to move it back a few times because of scheduling conflicts. Having the first Palestinian roundtable in months. It's hard because, justifiably so, there's many Palestinians that don't want to go on camera. There's very hardcore retaliation economically. Hell, there's even violence by these Israeli extremists who got dual citizenship in America and in Israel. They come here, they harass Palestinians. We've seen footage of the campuses on. That's why whenever you see Palestinians come on here for roundtable, they take a lot of bravery. That's why I come out in front. That's why my position, and I openly say I support Palestinian resistance. I openly say that that I support a one-state solution where everyone had equal rights under the law. Because many Palestinians, they are not allowed to even take those common sense positions. There are a lot of Palestinians. I talk to Palestinians. I'll pass it right to you, Greg. I think you want to chime in. I have a lot of Palestinian activists I talk to. And many of them have reached out to me and said, "Hey, man, I do have to moderate like my position on Palestinian resistance because if I don't, I get fired. If I don't, I get attacked. I get threatened." That's why, and this is my position. I'm going kind of a rant now. I think as allies, it's very important for us to take the position that is correct, for us to stand strong on those positions, because many Palestinians, they're not able to, because they are fighting against the most violent, criminal, petty thugs on the planet that will end their life. Not even just physically, but economically. But Greg, I know you want to chime in. That was kind of just a rant randomly, but go ahead.
I actually agree with you too about that. The idea, the absurd idea that a two-state solution is even workable when you have West Bank that's ghettoized by illegal settlements that's completely detached from Gaza with 2 million, probably less now, Palestinians in Gaza, and they're just not connected or contiguous whatsoever. Just from the most basic political standpoint, it's absurd. But the idea of a two-state solution is the only framework that like the neoliberal world is able to entertain or envision at this time. And a lot of Palestinians feel like they have to exist for their own security within that framework, to be like, we want a two-state solution. When I was coming onto this issue years ago, I very much had the idea that, this is not my issue. I grew up in a privileged white upbringing, and then I was in the military, so I'm just going to stay in my lane, do military and geostrategic analysis, and not speak for what Palestinian liberation looks like for them. But then I realized over time, it's like, no, I'm really the only one who can, because I'm a veteran and I'm white. So yeah, it's one state or bust. If you don't think so, you're an idiot. That's the only way it's going to work. Violence will continue until the occupation ends. And two-state solution, the way it's framed, is still an occupation, because Israel will control what goes in. They will not allow Palestinians to have their own military, and states need their own military. So how is that still not occupation? So anyways, I know I have a lot of Palestinian friends who can't say it, but I'm saying it because I'm more protected than they are. So
yeah, and they talk. I had kind of those conversations where they said, "Hey man, I can't say it though," and I get it, man. They facing the kind of pressure we can't possibly imagine. They get doxxed, harassed all the damn time. But that's very well said. Once again, they didn't solve the apartheid problem in South Africa by creating two states. It's a completely incoherent solution. One state, equal rights under law, the same way that Muslims, Jews, and Christians have been living forever. They are currently living in the Middle East. So the idea that you're going to separate them. Anyway, you got to turn my rant for you. I'm glad that you're back.
And just one more point. One more point about the one state solution. No one's saying that's going to fix everything. Okay, racism didn't go away when Jim Crow ended. All right, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. It's the only sane step forward.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm gonna share this quickly because I still have one more topic I want to share regarding Trump threatening Russia today. But I think this is funny because Glenn Greenwald, you guys know, friend of the show, I've been on System Update. I love his coverage of this because he's obviously does a lot of work on the free speech. He gave the right a lot of credit on free speech when they pushed back on Democrats. Now that the Republicans are showing themselves as hypocrites, and there's many of these like right wingers that went on Glenn's show, for example, and talking about how, oh my God, we gotta stand for free speech. And Glenn is realizing he was betrayed, man. So Glenn is on his arc right now where he's going after these motherfuckers aggressively. And if you haven't seen it, Glenn has been absolutely on fire, calling out these right-wing scum. He said, look at these people. At least Stefanik proclaims anti-Israel hate will not be tolerated on American campuses. You're allowed to hate the United States, Canada, China, Peru, and anyone you want, even whispers Israel. The free speech right wants to censor hate speech for one foreign country. And the reason I'm sharing this is because Gassad is the best example.
This guy sucks.
Yeah. And I saw this exchange, and Glenn destroyed this dude. I'm not going to rehash the entire thing, But Gassad is the perfect example of the hypocrite Zionist right wing on free speech, because he made his entire career complaining about how the left are becoming snowflakes, how the left is complaining about racism everywhere. I seen like a clip of him, Joe Rogan, going on this rant talking about how we got to stand for free speech and the left is the enemy of free speech. And then the second that October 7th happened, I'm sure he probably been an anti-free speech hypocrite his entire career, but this is only when I started following him post October 7th. He's saying, hey man, this had nothing to do about criticizing Israel, had nothing to do with free speech. This had to do with the intimidation, the threats, the assaults, and the endless harassment of Jewish students. You got to see, whenever it has to do with Israel, then everything is legit.
Oh, yeah, you know, most campus organizers I know are actually Jewish. So there's that. Also, you know, when people on the right talk about, you know, the left hates free speech, it's like, I mean, we just don't want you to like be dropping F slurs and N bombs. You know, you still can. We're just going to shame you for it. But like, that's their issue. Like, it's free speech when I can use slurs, but anytime, you know, Israel's threatened, it's now hate speech or something, and now we become massive snowflakes.
Yeah, for the sake of time, I'm not gonna rehash the whole thing, but just know Glenn destroys this dude. I'm gonna just read this part. If you want to check out Glenn. Glenn literally destroys this guy. But look at what he's saying. And I'm sorry to interrupt, Greg. I'll pass right to you. I'm sorry to interrupt. But here's his tweet. I'm Jewish with a very rough childhood in the Middle East, and yet I support the right of Holocaust deniers. I'm a free speech absolutist. Criticize Israel's policy all you want. What is taking place on university campuses is not a manifestation of free speech. So Gus Sad say he's okay with Holocaust deniers, but if you protest Israel on college campuses, then all of a sudden you are out of line.
That's insane, actually. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, we can move on. He's the number one example.
How many followers does he have on his platform?
This dude, he has a lot, man. He's still respected by many people on the right. 1 million followers. Many people on the right who still quote this guy, even though he's a complete and utter fraud. I can do a 1 hour show just showing you guys how much of a fucking fraud this guy is, but I'm gonna keep it short. You guys see, he created his whole career based on, at least from what I know in the politics sphere, being a free speech advocate. Now he's saying that, hey man, I have a history. This is actually summing up this tweet in a nutshell. I have a history of being free speech advocate, except this time. This time I'm uncomfortable.
No, this time it's different, okay? Because the kids occupying a library at Butler or in Butler Hall or in Barnard, I just saw the video from this weekend that sparked this new wave of outrage. Sorry, it's been a long week. I'm struggling to speak good.
Yeah, same here.
So a lot of these these Zionist shills on X were like, you know, they're not allowing students to study, and literally all the pro-Palestine people were doing was sitting writing their term papers with their computers out. It's just all of this is patently absurd.
Yeah, I'm gonna move on for our last topic just for the sake of time. What the hell is what video is playing? This Fox News website.
Oh yeah,
but this is the last story I want to cover just real quick. Where Trump, I think this is kind of delusional. I want to pull up my tweet. I couldn't find it, but let me pull it right back up. Where Trump lashed out at Russia and now threatening Russia with sanctions. And I found this hilarious. Here's a tweet. Sorry, I accidentally closed the tab, but here's the tweet. And I want to get your reaction to this.
No. Why did he have to put pounding in quotes? Everything he does is so weird. Based on the fact that Russia's absolutely pounding Ukraine.
Why did he do that? That actually is kind of weird. Gotta think about it. If you haven't seen the tweet, I'm gonna read it real quick and I'll pass it right to you, Greg. I know you have a lot of thoughts on this. And you can speak in general about Trump's attempts to create peace. I just think this is delusional because the same thing he told to Zelensky. I'm like, bro, Trump, you don't have the cards. You don't have the cards, sir. Russia is in control. and they can set whatever deal they want. But let me read the tweet, and then you can respond, Greg. He said, based on the fact that Russia is absolutely pounding Ukraine on the battlefield right now, I am strongly considering large-scale banking sanctions and tariffs on Russia until a ceasefire and final settlement agreement on peace is reached. To Russia and Ukraine, get to the table now before it's too late. Thank you. Once again, I can appreciate the tension. He's delusional here. What's your thoughts, Greg?
Has no one told Trump that we have a maximum pressure sanctions campaign against Russia right now? Like, didn't we kick them out of the SWIFT banking system? Like, what is he talking about? There's already a maximum pressure campaign. Like, what's he gonna do? Double maximum pressure?
That's a great point. And
I feel like he's putting this tweet out because his administration's got a lot of backlash for how he's treated the Ukrainians. Of course, I think this is a war that's never supposed to happen. I still really support countries' right to self-determination, all that. And I do have massive problems. I've been on the public record about the Zelensky and Zelensky's government, but he caught a lot of actual, for legitimate reasons, backlash. Because 2 days ago, they cut the majority of U.S. intelligence support to Ukrainians as a way to, leverage the ceasefire deal, which I guess kind of makes sense. But, in your great power politics, now a lot of Ukrainians who don't want to even be fighting in the first place are going to die. That's the bottom line. And so a lot of people were pissed off about that. And then he wanted to, his White House yesterday floated the idea of deporting with ICE, repealing legal documentation for over about 250,000 Ukrainians in the U.S. to be deported back to Ukraine. And they actually are not undocumented. There are actually 600,000 undocumented Europeans living and working in the United States. But no, he's not. He's actually said he was going to go after documented Ukrainian war refugees in America and send them back to Ukraine. And that was kind of insane as well. So it looked like very political. So when I see this tweet, I see a bunch of performative bullshit where, he's being like, oh, I'm being fair. I'm not just politically targeting Ukrainians who don't want to go fight in the war that they disagree with that are living in America. But no, I'm also going to sanction Russia as well. But of course, MAGA voters don't know that there's already a maximum pressure sanction campaign going on. So just like all of Trump's shit, it's completely performative.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I'm glad he brought up the fact that Trump is trying to deport all those Ukrainians, because you guys know why he's doing that, right? And this is why Trump doesn't have the cards, man. That's why I'm glad you set me up for this, Greg. This shows why Trump doesn't have the cards, man, because Russia is in complete control. This war is lost, guys. A lot of people forget, and I know you covered this as well. Many European leaders was even throwing the idea like, hey, man, we need to think about some peace settlement. This is before Trump was elected. They were flowing this idea because this war was lost months ago. Months ago, this shit was lost. Ukraine is scrambling to find fresh fighters.
You know what I think's happening? When Russia first invaded, they had that two-pronged attack coming, the massive armor column coming from Belarus, and then they invaded the Donbass. And the Russian military had a massive systemic problems. They didn't have a good NCO corps. Sergeants didn't really exist, which is why so many generals and senior officers were getting sniped by Ukrainian snipers, because they'd have to actually go to the front lines and deal with stuff themselves. And then they were completely exposed on their Belarus convoy. They ran out of fuel. A lot of Russian conscripts didn't know what was going on. They had a bunch of large-scale systemic problems in their military at first. They've changed and restructured everything over the past couple of years. And so when you're looking at the Istanbul Accords, one of the reasons the U.S. wanted to put the kibosh on that, and NATO wanted to put the kibosh on that, because the Ukrainian army was actually making significant decisive gains against the Russian army at first. But of course, they didn't have the manpower. They didn't have the industrial base. They're never going to be able to outproduce or outman Russia. So over 2 years, they restructured their entire military, but there's still this delusion that, you know, if there's one more weapon system, one more Kursk offensive, we could re-emulate the opening months of the war in Ukraine where they rolled up the Russians. It's not going to happen ever again. They've fixed all their problems.
It was absolutely delusional. I'm trying to remember who it was. I want to say Mike Pence, but now it was some Republican who was, and it was a long time ago. That's why my memory faded on this. But I remember he was criticizing Biden. And it was like a neocon critique of Biden's plan in Ukraine. He said, if only Biden didn't delay the M1 Abrams tanks, and only if he did it, like there was nothing that Biden could have done that would have stopped this result. And it like you say, it's pure delusion. The last receipt we're gonna play, I think it was a great conversation, but the last thing I'm gonna show here for today. It shows why people like Bernie Sanders are disgusting. I've roasted him so many times. Don't need to get back into it. But the entirety of the NATO left is disgusting, utterly repulsive people. Can
you be left and pro NATO at the same time?
Yeah, that's actually why I like that term, because it's supposed to be oxymoronic on purpose, just to show how ridiculous people like Bernie is. That's why I always like to use that term, NATO leftist, because oxymoronic inherently. But that describes Bernie. That describes Marianne Williamson, who had a tweet today where she called Trump a Russian puppet, a Russian asset today. She had to delete it because I ratioed her after that. Because you asked, I had Rokan on my show. You really believe the United States fights war for democracy? That's what we believed. Meanwhile, if you listen to the neocons, and this is an article I just read, it came out a few days ago, they will openly admit that the reason why we need to support the Ukraine war because it benefits the military-industrial complex. So this sums up the article in a nutshell. Here's this article. Why the fate of Ukraine still matters to America. And then you get 2 paragraphs in, they immediately just admit that the quiet part out loud. Another thing Americans today may not understand is that almost all the money we spend to Ukraine stays right here. Funds that lawmakers approved to arm Ukraine, explains the Washington Post, are not going directly to Ukraine, but are being used stateside to build new weapons or to replace weapons sent to Kyiv from U.S. stockpiles. Almost 90% is going to Americans. So it's essentially them saying, hey, man, you guys should support the Ukraine war because it benefits the military-industrial complex.
Yeah, 90% is going to Americans. What fresh hell of a trickle-down economic policy delusion do you think that is? That 90% of the Ukraine funding is going to Americans, like working-class Americans.
What you really, and this is what, and that's the best way he can sell it without being an obvious sell, because he's saying, hey, man, the military-industrial complex need that. He painted a delusional idea that it goes to Americans. We all know that's not true. The last thing I'm going to share, I covered this many times before, and this is why the NATO left is disgusting, because they were cheering this on. This is why Emmanuel Macron doesn't want this war to end. This is why all the military-industrial complex-owned fools, this is why the BlackRock-owned leadership, this is why the Goldman Sachs-led leadership, this is why the BlackRock leadership in Germany now, Germany elected a BlackRock prime minister. This is why they don't want the war to end. Because just like Gaza, it's used as a test bed for battlefield invasion. But go ahead, Greg. I'll give you last thoughts. This was a good foreign policy power hour today.
So one of the reasons that the defense establishment wanted the Ukraine war to continue was because there was a lot of anxieties over what drone warfare would look like. Because when it broke out, we were just on the cusp of this new era, this new hellish era of drone warfare. And the U.S. actually wanted to see what it would look like without having to have our own troops involved, because there was tons of anxiety because no one knew what drone warfare would look like. And no one predicted it would look like this, and got to this insane degree of, capability as well, where drones now, because of the weapons test in Ukraine, can no longer be jammed by electronic warfare because they've developed these 5-kilometer long fiber optic cables to control the drones with. Nobody saw that 4 years ago. So the defense establishment wanted to see what it looked like and not involve American troops.
Yeah, that's fucking dark, man. It's dark, and that's why it's so frustrating to see people who consider so progressive support this war when you know what dark intentions that the people who manufactured the war actually have. But it was a great conversation. Thank you for joining us, Greg. You do great news at the Mintpress News. And I was on the Colonial Outcast. Make sure you got to check that out if you haven't seen it. Anything you want to plug or promote before we wrap up?
Oh, no, you guys just want to remind everybody that it's okay to take a break from the hellish news cycle and actually have a life and a weekend. So it's Friday. Consider doing that. This shit's not going to get any better, and the struggle is going to continue for many years. So pace yourself. It's a marathon.
Very well said, Greg. Thank you for joining us, guys. Thank you guys for watching this banger week. We have another banger week planned for you guys. Jody Brower will be joining us on Monday. I'm going to rest a bit for this weekend. Take Greg's advice. I advise you guys do the same. See you guys on Monday. Take care, my friends.